tuning back into Living Umpqua, the UFO UAP rabbit hole. This is episode 3, some interesting information. Here we are, episode 3, the episode that, for reasons beyond my control, or possibly because of some unknown interference, was missing from the timeline. Maybe you've already seen episodes 1, 2, 4, and 5. Maybe you didn't even notice episode 3 was gone. But now, here it is, appearing out of sequence like some kind of digital ghost. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did I just time travel? Am I watching this in an alternate reality where episode 3 always existed? Or, and hear me out, was this episode somehow erased from history and is only re-emerging into the timeline? Which brings us to today's topic. Dan Burish, or Dan Crane, a man who claims to have worked on government projects so secret, so reality-bending, that our very perception of time itself might not be what we think. A man who says he was involved with Project Looking Glass, a device allegedly used to see into the future. A man who might just hold the answers to whether or not this video is appearing in the correct timeline at all. Because if Dan Burish is to believed, if he's to be believed, we may have been warned about an impending catastrophe by actual time-traveling humans from the future that he claimed to have met that went by J-Rod, a visitor from a far-off timeline, and that he worked under government programs attempting to navigate an interdimensional crisis that could reshape the fate of humanity. Oh, and let's not forget the T9 Treaty, a supposed agreement between humans and our future selves that might have altered reality as we know it. Which means if this episode disappeared, only to suddenly return, was it erased by an alternate future? And if so, who or what just let it back in? Or maybe, just maybe, it was never missing at all. And you're the one who traveled here. The truth is out there, but it's not necessarily in the right order. Also, if the real conspiracy here is the YouTube algorithm, then do me a favor. Like and subscribe and comment below. Unless, of course, you've already done that in the future.
In the next 4-year period, we're getting set to lay the groundwork for establishing the protocols that are going to govern our relationship with this extraterrestrial civilization for the next 10,000 years. I mean, people in the future are going to look back on this conversation today and others that are taking place now during this period of time as to how did this happen? How did we succeed in establishing a positive and constructive, mutually beneficial relationship with this civilization or not? The people aren't used to being part of history. Just not. And that they freak out, over being even near a celebrity.
Yeah.
And the problem is they've been trained to keep their place like that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, the people that are now alive are given the opportunity to participate in this absolute watershed event of history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they can be part of the history that is getting set to be written. That if you bring to this experience a fear, a concern that, that these are diabolical entities out there, or demons, or satanic beings, or something like that. If you do that, you're bringing that aspect of potential reality into play, okay? And so that people need to be extraordinarily careful not to go treading into that.
You pretty much think, how could they keep something like this secret? It's a crime against science, it's a crime against the people and all that, but your feelings change once you're privy to the information. Obviously, the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are, and the craft are there must be some sort of factory and an entire civilization somewhere. And if in fact that is true, and it apparently is, then there must be others.
Welcome to episode 3, a missing piece of the puzzle, now restored to the timeline. And trust me, the fact it vanished before might not be a coincidence. Think about it. The moment you pressed play, you became a part of a paradox. Is this episode appearing now because it was meant to be here all along? Or, and stay with me, is this evidence of an alternate reality where YouTube uploads, much like classified government projects, don't always follow the laws of time? Now buckle up, because this story has everything. Shadowy government groups, a microscopic particle that can heal the human body, and a secret effort to prevent a catastrophic pole shift in 2012 that could have wiped out civilization. Oh, And let's not forget the time-traveling descendants of humanity, the J-Rods, and an alien artifact known as Looking Glass, a device allegedly capable of peering into the past, present, and potential futures. According to Dan Burish, or Dan Crane, however you decide to call him, Project Lotus was all about a mysterious Ganesh particle, a biological anomaly that could regenerate ecosystems, cure disease, and, if you believe the claims, alter DNA itself. Sounds like science fiction, right? Well, Burish insists that the particle was key to saving the planet, or at least steering humanity away from an apocalyptic fate. But that's just the beginning, because if you follow the threads deeper, we get to Project Aquarius, an initiative allegedly dedicated to understanding extraterrestrial life and their technology. Sounds a lot like reverse engineering. We're talking full-scale reverse engineering, classified biological studies, and ancient Sumerian cylinder seals somehow being the key to operating the Looking Glass device. Now, here's where things get really weird. Burish claims that every timeline the government analyzed with this technology ended at the same point, right around December 21st, 2012. Sound familiar? Yeah, the date that a lot of conspiracy theorists and doomsday preppers swore was the end of the world. What did the Looking Glass actually see? And if reality continued past that date, did something or someone change it? And let's not forget the beings Burish says were involved. First, we've got the J-Rods, human from our future. Then there are the P-54 and P-52 beings, which are distant future descendants who either thrived or suffered catastrophic genetic decline depending on which timeline they came from. The Orions, also known as the Nordics, supposedly left Earth during the apocalypse and returned later as a separate species altogether. So let's ask the real question. If Burish was telling the truth and these projects really happened, are we even in the correct timeline right now? Listen to this interview on the A52 podcast with Danny Sheehan about his experience with Dan Burish, and then we're going to go a little farther into this rabbit hole with actual interviews from Dan Burish and some additional information I was able to pull after digging on the web.
Instantly makes me think of Dan Burish with J-Rod.
Yeah.
You know, so many people dismissed that story. It would be interesting to see him and Bob and all of them just be vindicated one day. You know,
Well, Burish, twice, 3 different times that I had people set up meetings that I was supposed to go meet Burish, and every single time, he'd have some kind of an excuse, like, his mother's horse died, or,
right,
so,
yeah,
or that his wife had decided she didn't want to talk to anybody anymore, and so finally I just sort of dropped it. I've got a whole stack of stuff in my office there of all the Burish stuff and lots of details about it. So someday I may have to sit down and go through it again and talk with him.
What's one question you would ask Dan Burish if you could ask him right now and it would be like the last time you ever saw him? What would that question be?
Does he have any idea of where J-Rod, is now, or is there anybody else? Are there any other beings that we are presently in direct communication with? Because we've gotten a lot of information since that time of different people that say they've been in underground facilities and that there are actually different beings there.
All right, friends, let's talk about Dan Burish's project Looking Glass. You ever have one of those moments where you feel like reality just glitched? You walk into a room, forget why you're there, and you suddenly feel like some invisible hand just kind of nudged you, maybe into an alternate timeline. Yeah. Well, what if that's exactly what happened? So, according to Dan Burish, government scientists, microbiologists, and professional dropper of mind bending bombshells, there was this device, a big mysterious thing hidden away in some top secret facility, Project Looking Glass. And what did this bad boy do? Oh, nothing major. Just help people see their future or their potential future, as Dan says, almost like the Force. You take into it what's with you. So folks would actually see alternate futures kind of based on their preconceived notions of what they wanted that future to be. No big deal, right? Except there was a problem. They start running all these simulations looking at different possible futures, and they all of them ended at the exact same point. Some say it was December 21st, 2012. If you actually listen to Dan in his interviews, he says around that time, but doesn't actually give that as a date. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, wasn't that supposed to be the Mayan doomsday? Exactly. But here's where it gets even more weird. Burish says that after that date, the looking glass stopped working. Like someone pulled the plug. Suddenly, no more future predictions. No more glimpses beyond that point. Just blank. So either the universe ran out of content like a bad Netflix series, or someone may have changed something. And if you wonder what I'm sipping on, it's my trusty Pendleton whiskey every time I do one of these podcasts, because I find when I go down this rabbit hole, nothing hits the spot like a nice glass of Pendleton whiskey. So, this is where things go full sci-fi, because Burish talks about J-Rods, short, gray-skinned aliens who are actually humans from the future. Yeah, you heard me. Future us. But they're not alone. There's also the P45s and P52s, different evolutionary branches of future humanity. And from what I can gather, a P plus 45 or a P plus 52 is that many thousands of years into the future. So if David Burish mentions a P45, he's talking about a human 45,000 years into the future. And if he's talking about a P52, he's talking about one 52,000 years into the future. All right, so here we are. The P45's not doing so hot, right? Not doing great. Think oversized heads, frail bodies, and major radiation damage. Basically, if your worst sleep-deprived self could time travel, that's essentially a P45. Not to mention, David Burish says that they were having health problems here, and part of his job under microbiology was to help this J-Rod stay alive. All right, now the P52s, we're talking another, 7,000 years of evolution. They're more stable, they're taller, they look more human than the Orions, the ones who just noped it out of Earth entirely before things got bad. Apparently, they're chilling somewhere in space while we all deal with, whatever this is that we're dealing with. But the real question is, what happened in 2012? Did we get saved from some apocalyptic disaster? I remember hearing a lot about the Mayan calendars and everything else, but was a world supposed to end and somehow that timeline was altered? Did we get saved from some apocalyptic disaster? Did we just hop into a different timeline where things sort of continued as normal? Or are we just living in the backup version of reality while the real timeline got deleted like an old MySpace page? I remember MySpace, love MySpace. And if that's true, who chose this version? Burisch suggests that somebody, government, aliens, Majestic 12, some type of treaty between them, some time-traveling janitor, I guess, who accidentally tripped over the power cord, somebody altered the course of history. And now we're just here in this version of reality. So the next time something feels off, the Mandela effect, deja vu, the Berenstein Bears, the feeling that you definitely remember something happened differently, just ask yourself, are we supposed to be here? Or are we playing out a timeline someone patched together at the last minute? Wow. Either way, if this timeline was a software update, I gotta say they probably could have fixed a few more bugs.
So it's back to that question. Let me just rephrase it for you. Can you describe in detail the first time, what it was like to meet this being for the first time?
My original feeling was I was looking at a giant insect. It's the best I can, just off the cuff. It looked like a giant insect, being dark brown and hunched in a corner, very insectoid in appearance. It almost looked like it had an exoskeleton. I felt afraid inside because I was always told that monsters weren't real. And now I find out they are, but they live in the heart of men. Because even when we were first introduced to the J-Rod, they were him-hawing around as to its origin, his origin. Poppycock. I didn't believe it initially. I didn't believe it. However, deep inside, I held open the possibility because of what happened to me earlier in my life.
As of about 2017, I would expect probably that all of these little pieces of equipment will probably all get reassembled, yeah.
Turned back on?
Oh, sure.
2017? That's quite a while.
2016, 2017.
Oh, not until then?
Probably not.
Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. The whole thing, dude. That's not our that is on us, dude. Well, if there's like look at that thing. It's rotating. Nickel 6-1 tank object. Woohoo! Roger. There's troubleshooting. Did you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that.
Now, before the researched in this subject get on top of me, I understand that those videos and those recordings took place in 2004. My point is that article didn't come out till 2017, which is kind of around the time Dan Burish said we'd probably be seeing this kind of weird stuff again. So it's just one thing I thought I would point out before we get into what Commander Fravor has to say about his interaction with this unknown aerial phenomenon. It's absolutely fascinating. Listen to him here on the Joe Rogan show, which I love, by the way, of course.
So when it's taking off, how fast, when it just sort of like leaves the field of view and takes off to the left, how fast is that going?
For something to leave the field of view that fast with the pod just staring is pretty fast. I mean, it's like out of here.
Like nothing that we have?
No, because we can't. I don't care what airplane it is. So let's just use the F-22 Raptor. That's probably it's probably the best airplane in the world right now, performance-wise. It can't take off like that, especially if it's a hover. I mean, you're talking something that's just sitting in space in the wind, and then it just all of a sudden accelerates. Airplanes don't work that way.
And it's not leaving any exhaust plume?
No, notice there's none. And when you go back to the IR
at the end?
Even in the IR, you don't.
Yeah, see, there's IR zoomed in, and there's no. You would see a plume if that was an airplane.
It's creepy how it takes off.
Yeah.
It's a propulsion system we don't have in our inventory, and no other nation does. That's how it's understood by the government.
Now that's so if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do that same maneuver, this system would be able to track it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it would stay with it until it got to the limits of the pod, as far as looking to the left. But
right.
And the radar would see it. I mean, when you get close enough, you're gonna, everything becomes visible because you get burned through with radar and how radars actually work. This one is, you tell me, but this was performance beyond. I mean, it's like when we saw it disappear when it flew in front of my nose. I mean, I'm talking something. I'm within a half mile of it, looking at it, and it gets in front of me and just disappears.
Commander David Fravor is a retired U.S. Navy pilot, best known for his involvement in this case, the 04 USS Nimitz UFO encounter. At the time, he was commanding officer of the Black Aces Squadron, VFA 41. Now, this is an elite Navy strike fighter squadron flying FA-18 Super Hornets. During a training exercise off the coast of California, this is when this experience happened to Fravor. They were redirected to investigate this case, and he's explaining here what he saw to Joe Rogan. This has become known as the Tic Tac UFO, small white oblong-shaped object with no visible wings or propulsion system. The object moved erratically, performed maneuvers beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft, as he just said. I think one of the most fascinating things he just said is how it just completely disappeared in front of his craft. To me, that is absolutely, I mean, this is unreal. This is not a crazy person. This is a guy that flies aircraft that costs more than some of us will make in our entire lives. He has the skills to understand what's happening around him and the tools to confirm what he's seeing is real. And he clearly has no doubt about what he saw. So now we're going to go back to a little bit of Dan Burish's story here. And we're going to jump between his 94 interview he had and then a 2007 interview he had, because when it comes to Dan Burish and this episode, I don't think that timeline really matters. Let's take a look.
We have Stargates, okay, that have been decommissioned.
Yeah.
Okay. Which access time travel technology.
Yeah.
Okay. These Stargates, before they were decommissioned, we must assume were used.
They were used for passing information and passing inhabitants this direction.
Oh, by other cultures coming this way, but not by us going elsewhere?
By P+45s and P+52s, both Orions and J-Rods.
What about all the other, I mean, I don't know if you're party to this, but how many other races are out there?
I am aware of one interdimensional species that won't speak with us directly and was communicating via the Orions, the P+52 Orions. That's it. I have never, it's been a joke. I hate to put it this way, but a lot of the UFO community, like to them, the stories have been a joke, and a lot of them have been proffered by the folkloristics unit in Majestic. They actually promulgated a lot of these stories, and now they hand me the bag to come out here and go, boo, sorry, the boogeyman ain't real, I guess.
Okay.
The only thing that I'm aware of are the P+45s and the P+52s. The intergrades between them, over the 7,000 years between them, cannot be contacted per treaty. The P+52 J-Rods and Orions I'm aware of, and the P+45 J-Rods. At the time the P+45s were around, they were unaware that the P+52 Orions, which would then be P+45 Orions, even existed.
All right. When you go down this rabbit hole and you start talking about time travel, bending time and space with Stargates, things start to get a little overwhelming, and the majority tend to check out and start thinking, okay, this is just wild. I think with the recent things that have been going on in our skies and all the information out there about paranormal events and things seeming to happen for a reason, and the new Jake Barber stuff about psionics and folks with psionic abilities being able to contact craft or non-human intelligence. So although this sounds crazy, these are interviews from 2007 and 1994 where Dan Burish is talking about all this stuff. Now, the reason he refers to him having to come out and say, boo, sorry, this stuff isn't real, this is the real truth, is because according to Dan Burish, he was assigned by the Majestic 12, a secret organization, very powerful organization that communicates with extraterrestrials and other groups across the world on treaties. Yes, treaties that we have with extraterrestrial beings to kind of maintain Earth and life. And what he implies is that they have already prevented one giant catastrophe, not just through his work alone, through microbiology, but the entire project altogether. They were able to work together to prevent this supposed tragedy. So now you have these two species in the future whose history is completely changed, and now none of us know what's going to happen. It's crazy. I had a person that's very, very well versed at reading people and body language take a look at some of Dan Burish's interviews. The consensus is he's either telling the truth or he believes he's telling the truth. But is he intentionally lying? No. So you have to make up your own mind on that. But I find it absolutely fascinating that the story got absolutely crapped on by the UFO community when it came out early on. They were willing to believe so many things, but for whatever reason, when a guy like Dan Burish comes out, who a reporter like Bill Hamilton swears by, they kick him to the wayside, and because he doesn't want to do certain interviews with certain people, they discredit him. You've got to make up your own mind. I can tell you there is so much out there on Dan Burish, Dan Crane. There are very strange websites out there. There are threads. I'm not going to mention the name of the thread. If you do a little digging, you'll find it. And there are just a lot of really strange things. And we're going to get into somebody on the Night Shift podcast that did a little bit of a background check on Dan Burish. I think you'll be a little surprised at what they found. So I'm going to let Dan continue here.
They didn't even know that they still survived at the time. And they only found out as a consequence of coming here in the treaty negotiations.
Suspend disbelief for a moment and walk with the idea that this is real. That the ruins that are present on the moon and on Mars, the ancient temples, were in fact, and are in fact, the gifts of our own progeny. Can you imagine what is going to happen when those temples, which were prayed to as the gods, are found out to be nothing more than the creations of men? That the men themselves were those who were being worshipped, will fall headlong into the pool of Narcissus. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we'll find truth, love, God, in something other than buildings and stones and marble. Maybe we'll find out who he really is, or she, it, or just us.
If you go into Dan's work here, he's not just implying. What he actually says is that some of these time-traveling P-45s or P-52s went way back in time, used their technology, and essentially lived like gods, which would explain how the pyramids were built, which would explain a lot of the weirdness that we're just starting to uncover with ancient civilizations, and some of the things we already have uncovered and just have no explanation for, as far as hieroglyphs with things in the sky and Native American, paintings, just all kinds of crazy stuff you can find when you do digging on this subject. So Dan is saying that humans did what humans do and took advantage of technology they had and went back and, lived the high life like a god. And that's why there's so much mystery around some of these ancient pyramids and ancient, societies and compounds that they've been finding. Pretty fascinating stuff.
Just what it was you were looking at.
All right.
Without you
You want me to get into the microbial?
Well, maybe just a general statement of what that was. What you thought you were looking at. Just to give us a little.
However, they were unusual in the sense that their cytoplasm and their internal organization, the organelle structures were fused, such as dictyosomes to mitochondria, things like that. And we had no idea what we were looking at. The original contention made by the individuals next to me was that we were looking at some type of biological warfare material, an intermediate. The looking glass, I find out, is one of the ERBs. It's an Einstein-Rosenbridge promoter. It's composed of a spherical, spinning, arced, rectangular solid matrix of nickel, cadmium, and barium. There is a spinning disk underneath it, which is supercooled. Into this is injected into the center of these spinning, and I'm not a physicist, spinning disks, is injected an argon gas. Into that is injected some type of repulsion matter. It's a gravity repulsion matter. They are obtaining the gravity repulsion matter from the heavy materials that have been obtained from the J-rods, the 115 variety material. And apparently when they bombard it with enough electromagnetism, this stuff repels gravity and it turns into some sort of exotic matter. Yes?
Is this something that they use only for the transmission of information, or can they transport a material object through time?
You know the answer to that. At least you probably heard some rumor. There have been mistakes. There were mistakes. Animals were attempted to transport from one location to another, the production of two of the devices, and they put them in resonance or something like that. I'm not a physicist. I don't know. But I was, in fact, present during a human attempt. The human did not survive. The human was not put in there under duress of any sort. It was a volunteer situation, and the human did not survive. But the human changed, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. In essence, yes, it was a linear. It was a attempt to transport an individual over a linear distance, which I understand is the same thing as time travel. I presume that it was from Orion. And it was information, defense-related information on how this type of equipment, how an Einstein-Rosenbridge at a distance could be used to pull information out of a defense computer system. And I don't mean a U.S. defense computer system. And I said, you know what? No. Look, we've got the technology here, we've got the talent, we've got the willpower, and we've got the willing to defend our own country without the use of something involving time technology. I would be very happy and very relieved to feel as though I was responding to the elected government of the United States of America with what talents God's given me. I'm responsible to the people of the United States of America. The Congress knows it's not in control. They know that this is a train, a wild train out of control. And they want that control back. They're not stupid. They know that there are things that are going on down the hall from them that they can't fathom. They deserve to have that back in their hands because that's what they were elected to do. And if we care at all about what's left of our Constitution, they deserve to have that in their hands. Aren't we the masters of our destiny in our country? Aren't we supposed to be?
What I think is the strongest points that have to be considered for those that have the knee-jerk reaction that this is all bullshit. There is a tremendous amount of information that has been provided investigators and researchers who have looked into the story. Let me go through some of these pages with you. There are certificates of various types, the UNLV scholarship, graduation, National Honor Society, the Truman Scholarship nomination, Pre-Medical Honor Society. He appears in the Marquis Who's Who in Science and Engineering and 3 other volumes of Who's Who. His birth certificate, marriage certificate, academic letters of recommendation, 1 to Stanford University, 1 for UNLV, College of Business Economics, Department of Management. Additionally, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, from the Vice President of Academic Affairs, Northern Arizona University. Supposedly his professional advisor was William J. Leonard. I looked him up and found he was at State University of New York, where Dan got his PhD at the time that Dan claimed he was working on it. This is something that's something I was able to discover on my own. Dan appears in 4 Who's Who journals. And for those who are not aware, there are these journals that are put out every year, or every couple of years, detailing exceptional individuals in science, engineering, medicine, and politics. Dan and his PhD record appears in 2 of these books, both of which I own myself. I wanted to purchase them off eBay myself so I could see them in print, and there's his name, and I've circled here. His PhD is being referenced. So it is reviewed by the Marquis editorial staff before being written in sketch form, and a pre-publication proof of the composed sketch is sent to potential biographies for verification. Every verified sketch returned by a candidate and accepted by the editorial staff is written in the final Marquis Who's Who format. This process ensures a high degree of accuracy. And it's a letter to Richard talking about what's up, things that are going on in his life, most of which is on the first page. And on the back of it, he talks about Dan. And here's what he says. And I got this only 3 weeks ago. I think Collins got the Dan Crane story wrong. There was a Captain Danny Crane who was assigned to the QS4 projects sometime in the late 80s. Captain Crane was a biologist who worked on the R4800 program at PS2 Complex. That's Papoose. His assistant, and I never heard this before, his assistant was Captain Arthur Price. The sequence found was nothing like humans. Captain Crane even baffled genetic scientists with his findings. Captain Price is now working with Dr. Kit Green at the CIA.
Whether you believe the claims of Dan Burish or not, we have to agree the lack of official disclosure on extraterrestrial life, advanced technology, and secret government projects has created a vacuum. One that's been filled with speculation, conspiracy theories, and conflicting narratives. Without concrete evidence or transparency, we're left to piece together information from whistleblowers, leaked documents, and anecdotal accounts, which often lack verification, but they still gain traction. This secrecy has given rise to a phenomenon where any theory, no matter how outlandish, can find an audience if it provides a compelling or plausible explanation or a explanation for unexplained events. Figures like Dan Burish have stepped into this space, offering intricate narratives about classified projects like Looking Glass, Project Aquarius, and the J-Rods. Since the government and scientific institutions largely dismiss, or ignore such claims rather than openly refute them, it only fuels further belief that they must be hiding something. As a result, the lack of disclosure has not suppressed interest in these topics. It only amplified it. It's created an environment where theories, no matter how speculative, are given weight simply because no official counter narrative exists. In essence, by refusing to engage with the subject, authorities have inadvertently legitimized the very speculation that they seeked to avoid. Or was that their goal the whole time? To muddy up the waters. Is Dan Burish telling the truth or not? That's up to you. you're going to have to research it, find out for yourself. Personally, I find the entire subject fascinating for a lot of reasons. One being that I always thought extraterrestrials were from the future, even before I heard the name Dan Burish. So, of course, I got swept up into the rabbit hole. And I can tell you, I spent a lot of hours watching videos, reading documents, and I'm going to post some resources I use below for this video, and, like Project Almanac. Don't discount everything, because until we get that disclosure, anything's possible. Speaking of disclosure, I just want to give you a sneak peek into this new film coming out. And what I find fascinating is the documentarian that made the film states that in the process of making a documentary about disclosure, he may have had disclosure. Let's check out this next little bit. We've got some more recent UFO UAP sightings, and then the Age of Disclosure trailer. That film has not yet come out, but stay tuned and check it out. I find it very, very fascinating. I can't wait to see it myself.
The American people deserve to hear more about special access programs. Congress has a right to know if there's any unsanctioned weapons development. Satellite imagery that has not been provided to Congress. Congress created the All-Domain Resolution Office in the NDAA of 2022. In its initial analysis, there are 171 uncharacterized UAP reports, and this is the words from the report, that appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's time for Congress to reinsert ourselves. I call on our military leaders and intelligence officials to release more information to the American people about UAPs. We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come. Thank you, Ranking Member.
And yeah, it's interesting. It's somewhere along the way of making this movie, my documentary about disclosure literally became disclosure.
Yeah.
The American people are ready to receive the truth.
Humanity is not the only intelligence in the universe.
Humanity is not the only intelligent species.
We are absolutely not alone.
Non-human intelligence exists.
UAPs are real, they're here, and they're not human. I spent 25 years as a senior official with the CIA.
I worked on highly classified UAP programs.
28 years as an astrophysicist.
I served as the 4th Director of National Intelligence.
Director of Aviation Security in the National Security Council.
A one-star admiral after 32 years of service.
People that come forward with this, I feel like they've taken their life in their own hands.
I was recruited to a highly sensitive government program that investigated unidentified aerial phenomenon.
For over 16 years, on behalf of the U.S. government, I worked as a senior intelligence official on the unidentified aerial phenomenon topic.
We learned that the U.S. government was involved in a long-running secret war with other nations to collect and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
So look at that thing. It's rotating. There's a whole fleet of them.
The first country that cracks the code on this technology will be the leader for years to come.
China has established its own version of a UAP task force.
You think for a second that they wouldn't consider using it to achieve their ends of domination?
This is similar to the Manhattan Project. This is the atomic weapon on steroids.
This is so secret, very, very few people in our entire government have been allowed access to it.
Even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis, but that begins to ramp out of control.
It's not acceptable to have secret parts of government that no one ever sees.
You better be careful about a government that doesn't trust its people, because there's no telling what they'll pull on you.
This is the biggest discovery in human history. You had information being locked away that could change the trajectory for species. It has so many beneficial impacts, including clean energy.
We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come.
What else you want to know?
Wow. Absolutely fascinating. There's been one showing of that film, as I understand it, at the South by Southwest Film Festival, but they're still looking for a partner to release it, to stream it. How interesting that they're having a problem getting a partner to release that. Okay. I want to wrap this up with a positive. At the end of the day, whether you believe the Dan Burish story or not, there's something undeniably uplifting about it. If Burish is right, then the universe isn't some cold, predetermined machine grinding toward an inevitable future. We shape it. Every decision we make, every act of kindness or cruelty, every moment of courage or hesitation, it ripples through time. It alters what comes next. And if he's wrong, well, that's almost better, because it means that even without ancient alien treaties, quantum prophecy, devices, or shadowy government projects, we still hold the pen in writing our own future. We don't need a looking glass to tell us what's possible. We create the possibilities ourselves. So whether we're on the path to a dystopian future or something far brighter, one truth does remain. The future isn't happening to us. It's waiting for us to build it. Thanks again for tuning in to Living Umpqua, the UFO UAP show. Down the Rabbit Hole, episode 3. In or out of order? You decide. I'll see you next time.